This weekend's Brazilian Grand Prix is set to be a highlight of the season so far, with track changes and difficult weather creating a challenging environment for all the teams. For Mercedes though, that is the absolute last thing they want. The Silver Arrows have pushed hard this season to try and close the gap to the top teams, but that has come at a cost. They're on the brink of a cost cap breach, and one mistake by either driver could see Mercedes severely punished at the worst possible time. Today, I'll check out Mercedes' cost cap concerns, why any breach would be an absolute disaster, and why the Brazilian Grand Prix will be Toto Wolff's worst nightmare. So don't go anywhere. Mercedes' 2024 campaign has been pretty forgettable. While Red Bull, Ferrari and McLaren have traded blows at the top of the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes have faded into obscurity. George Russell and Lewis Hamilton have had plenty of lonely races, as they found themselves not really racing anyone. They've been too slow to challenge the 5 drivers ahead of them, and too quick to face any real pressure from Perez or the Aston Martins. This can best be seen in the Constructors' Championship, where they sit 146 points behind third-placed Red Bull and 280 points ahead of Aston Martin. The same thing has happened in the Drivers' Championship, where George and Lewis are sat in a lonely little oasis, unable to catch anyone ahead of them, but also under no threat from those below. With only 4 races left in the season, the only thing Mercedes are fighting for now is podium appearances, but even their most fervent fans probably know deep down that there's little hope of that happening. Since that flurry of 3 wins in 4 races before the summer break, Mercedes' only podium has come courtesy of 2 cars in podium contention taking each other out. While Mercedes' success this season has been limited, it isn't through lack of trying. The Silver Arrows have basically stripped Brackley clean, throwing everything including the kitchen sink at the W15, but nothing has really worked. The car has been unstable and uncompetitive despite their best efforts. But this is now in the cost cap era. Those failed upgrades come at a price. Toto Wolff can no longer write blank checks for his factory team. Ferrari and McLaren lead the Constructors' Championship this season because they've made their upgrades work. They've got value for money, and Mercedes have not. Bad upgrades are wasted money, and Mercedes have basically set fire to the bank this year. That hasn't been helped by George Russell though. The soon-to-be lead driver at the Mercedes F1 team found himself running a much older spec car at the Mexican Grand Prix. Following a number of large crashes, Mercedes have completely run out of spare parts for George Russell's car. In Mexico, his car was essentially the Mercedes Silverstone spec. And while that car was a race winner almost 4 months ago, F1 moves pretty fast, and what was a race-winning car is no longer competitive with the frontrunners. Perplexingly, Russell actually managed to match his teammate for much of the Mexican Grand Prix. Having managed to avoid the barriers for most of the season, Lewis Hamilton was in Mercedes' most updated F1 car, but couldn't beat Russell over 1 lap, and couldn't match him in race pace until George got a broken front wing. If you wanted an example of how Mercedes have failed with their car development this season, the Mexican Grand Prix was it. A better driver, in a car that was 4 months newer, couldn't compete. Lewis could only match George once his front wing was flapping like a sock in the wind. The upper element of the left side of Russell's front wing was essentially useless for his entire second stint after it was damaged when overtaking Oscar Piastri. Speaking of how much of an impact it had, Toto Wolff said, "I think at a high speed it was 20 points. He then kind of drove around it very well, but obviously the more your tyres are being hit, the impact on lap time is exponential." Those 20 points of lost downforce cost George between 3 and 4 tenths of lap time, enough of a disadvantage for the shiny new Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton to catch up and overtake him. Mercedes have a far bigger problem than a mismatch of old upgrades though, with George Russell's regular wrecks creating a massive cost cap issue. But before I talk about that, if you want to support the channel, make sure to check out f1reverse.com, our merch store, and grab yourself some super clean F1 inspired apparel. Thanks a lot. Russell's massive crash on Friday in Mexico was his second in under a week, with a big shunt in Austin happening during qualifying the previous Saturday. Just a few races earlier, Andrea Kimi Antonelli found the barriers a few laps into his FP1 run at Monza in George Russell's car. The repeated crashes have been costly on Mercedes spares, and even more costly on their bank balance. Under F1's cost cap rules, teams must absorb the cost of new parts and rebuilds from their existing set budget, meaning less money for car development. This late in the season, though, car development has essentially come to an end, with the only work going on being focused on the design of next year's car. So Mercedes have already spent their money producing upgrades for this season, which by and large have not worked. What this means is that Mercedes can't just do less car development to save money to pay for repairs. That money is already spent. And that is creating a problem. After the Mexican Grand Prix, team boss Toto Wolff said, "Kimi's crash in Monza, George's crash in Austin, George's crash here. I love a driver to push, and I'd rather crash and we know what the car is capable of than not. In cost cap land, that is a tricky situation, so these 3 shunts put us on the back foot. And the one we had the day before yesterday was massive. We had to opt for a completely new chassis. That's a tremendous hit in the cost cap, so we probably have to dial down what we put on the car. We'll be having 2 upgrade packages in Brazil, 2 floors, but that's basically it, nothing else is going to come. We have certain limitation on parts, so we need to be creative how we manage this. And certainly, there is an impact on how many development parts we can put on the car, because the answer is 0. Those floor upgrades will have been planned in production before George's crash in Austin, but considering what has happened over the last 2 races, you can bet that Toto Wolff wishes he could have stopped them. George will likely have to run that new floor with a complete mismatch of other parts from various upgrade packages. And that is a problem. F1 parts don't work in a vacuum, they're part of a much larger machine. The Mercedes team will have designed this floor to work with their most up-to-date parts, but George doesn't have those parts. He's basically running a car built from the odds and ends that Mercedes have sitting around in cleaning closets. With those 2 new floors that are being flown to Brazil, Mercedes are probably sending a variety of parts which they thought they would never need again. Hamilton might find that the new floor works great for him, but for George, that floor isn't designed for the car he's going to be driving, and Mercedes won't have a clue how it's going to perform. The Brazilian Grand Prix is a sprint weekend as well, meaning Russell will have just 1 hour to try and get his Frankenstein car to work. And to add to Russell's pain, it's meant to rain all weekend in Brazil, and the track has been resurfaced, which is the perfect combination for utter carnage. But Russell being uncompetitive in his mismatched car is far from Mercedes' biggest problem. If they're forced into a cost cap breach this season, it would completely obliterate their chances under the new regulations in 2026. A breach would be confirmed by the FIA midway through the 2025 season, with any punishment applied for the following season. Taking Red Bull's breach in 2021 as the example, Mercedes could expect a 10% reduction in their aero testing time for a minor breach. A minor breach is classified as a less than 5% overspend of this season's $135 million cap, meaning an overspend not exceeding $6.75 million. There is no way Mercedes would overspend more than 5% due to car crashes. It would require a serious mistake or oversight in their accounting to make that happen. A 10% reduction in testing under brand new technical regulations would be such a huge handicap that it could hold Mercedes back for many seasons. When technical regulations are brand new, there are huge gains in lap time to be found, but to get them, you have to test a wide variety of different development paths. That means a lot of computational fluid dynamics tests on a wide variety of designs. As regulations age, the available development becomes less, and teams can be more targeted with their testing. But certainly during the first few years, it's a matter of throwing designs at the wall and seeing what sticks. Any reduction in capacity during that exploratory period could be terminal to Mercedes' championship hopes for seasons to come. If you were Toto Wolff, would you be worried about a wet and windy Sao Paulo Grand Prix sending you over the cost cap limit? Let me know what you think in the comments down below, and if you enjoyed the video and want to catch some more daily F1 news, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to F1 Reverse. Thanks a lot, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.